wanted to pull out of the space station, if I'm not mistaken. China made some comments as well and so on. But why suddenly are we not building? Is it because of current tensions and the fact that we don't want to collaborate with powers that are committing crimes against humanity? Is it because it's easier to do it alone with NASA, or is it what's behind?
I think there is always the case that basically because of geopolitical tension, things are not working anymore. The UN system is not working anymore. Cooperation on topics where cooperation is needed is not happening. So yeah, of course, like Russia and China are doing horrible things, and it's very obviously it's clear why Western allies don't want to work with them. But on the other side, is a bit like climate change topics should go beyond politics because they are at the benefit or the expense of humankind as a whole. So in theory, it would make sense to cooperate in space as much as possible, but because of geopolitical tension, this is simply not happening anymore.
Okay, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to understand this.
So the second example I want to point out is the Outer Space Treaty, which is a treaty dating back from the 60s, where basically one of the first actually breakthrough of the United Nations, where the UN basically crafted the basis of space law as we know it today. So what was allowed and not allowed to be done in space. And a lot of the language, a lot of the understanding stemming from this treaty was that basically you could not militarize space with weapons of mass destruction, but you could do it with conventional weapons, which is a bit worrisome. And also there was kind of an attempt to avoid extraction of resources, exploitations of celestial bodies. It wasn't very clear. It was a lot of fuzzy language, but it was clear that there was an attempt to come together on topics of using of natural resources in space and militarizing space, or avoiding the militarization.
Was it mainly not like to avoid a second a nuclear event or something like this?
For sure. That was one of the big topics, but in general, it was a framework to deal with space once humanity was able to get there. There was a very new thing. And this treaty held up until today, still used very much in any new framework and new discussion about space. But the problem is that because it's not being updated or changed in any way, countries and companies started kind of going beyond the what was forecasted by the treaty. So, for example, in 2015, because of the fact there was no clarity on commercial exploitation of resources, for example, on the moon or on asteroids and so on, the US Congress was lobbied heavily by space companies. At the end, passed the Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act of 2015, where basically allows for the appropriation of extraterrestrial resources. So basically, it gave the way for commercialization of space, which obviously has some positive sides, because if you commercialize space, it means that it's going to become more democratized as well. People will be able to go, and wealth might be produced as well. But on the other side, it also gives way for massive problems like competition of exploitation on the moon, right? Countries planting their flags and say, I want to take this, I want to take that. Wars potentially breaking out because of that. So the Outer Space Treaty was a wonderful example of cooperation and humankind coming together for a common good beyond political lines, because again, it was done during the Second World War. So it was possible to be done in the highest tension in probably recent history. But right now, we're not able to update it in any way. And so we actually witnesses the first stages, the first rush for resources. And I'm going to show you soon a treaty that's been done by the Western allies to basically establish a base on the moon, which is very cool, but it's at the expenses of others.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, we don't have an inner space treaty. We have an outer space treaty that is for arms control. So it's not actually on how we're going to deal with space as a whole.
I mean, I think there are vague statements of intention, like exploration for humankind or cooperation. But in practice, what they did, it was stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons in space.
But just to put it back in context, right? Like we have issues on Earth that are linked, or according to our point of view, and it's why we're doing this broadcast, that are linked to nation states, and the fact that we think first about our national interests, and the fact that we can't go beyond borders, and the fact that we're not managing to enable citizens, or we don't want to enable citizens to express themselves on global topics.
Yeah.
For me, there's few things that are so clearly global and common to the whole of humanity than what lies above our heads, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no delimitation that we can see, there's nothing. It's about our common potential and common threats, right? Like it's literally like what concerns us all. And yet what we're doing is saying, okay, so let's not have arms proliferation there. Great. I'm very happy about this, not to have like a massive weapon above my head. That's great. Although I think you probably have some. But we don't have anything saying, look, the citizens of the world need to be able to decide how space resources are used, distributed, and put together, right?
Yeah.
Know how to not replicate the same issue. So I was Googling at the same time because I remember seeing a lot of articles on space pollution and the fact that we're polluting space just like we're polluting Earth, putting random stuff out there without even thinking about it twice. And just to give you a number, so I went on space debris on Wikipedia. Out of January 2021, the US Space Surveillance Network reported that 21,000 artificial objects are in orbit above the Earth, including 4,450 operational satellites.
Yeah.
And
it's massive.
There were, as of 2019, there were 128 million species of debris smaller than 1 centimeters. And while we think it might not like actually be big, 1 centimeter, they have become a hazard to spacecraft, with the smallest objects that can cause damage akin to sandblasting, especially to solar panels and so on. So you've had a lot of actually accidents and damages being created out of space debris. And it's basically stuff that we just put out there, and it's often human-made objects and so on, and we just leave them out there without really thinking about it. And while I see like pictures of space with little lights that are debris looking very pretty, I'll share the link. It's actually insane. Like we're producing it to the same extent without thinking about the fact that we basically have a debris field above our heads.
And actually, this leads to the next point I wanted to cover. There is Starlink. So there is the company that Elon Musk built to bring internet across the planet at high speed. And it actually was used, for example, is used right now by Ukraine in the war. So it has definitely some very positive consequences as well. But it's so far only as of now, the whole Starlink constellation accounts for 3,000 small satellites in low Earth orbit. So 3,000 satellites have been sent only by a private company, authorized obviously by one country.
So weird.
But they are above our heads. So because the US allow for that, we are now completely covered by satellites. And the plan is to launch other 12,000 satellites in total, with a possible later extension to 42,000.
I'm interrupting you because Barnabas is saying Starlink is putting many satellites in orbit, and there are very few obligations they have to comply about cleaning those up after they are no longer useful.
Exactly.
Which is insane. I have a question though, if you know about this. Do states or current companies operating in space have obligations to clean it up after? Because from what I've read, like literally they just leave whatever they don't use. I remember watching a video, I don't know if it's actually true, but from astronauts being like, our dirty underwears, we don't have a way of disposing of them, so we just throw them out into space. I don't know if it's actually true, but I remember seeing something on YouTube like this.
I didn't know
so
that.
I was wondering if right now you actually have obligations or not.
International standards.
That are not enforced.
I read that for Starlink, for example, there was a massive outcry from astronomers saying like it's impossible, we can't see anymore the moon, whatever. Or deep, basically on the ground astronomers are very annoyed about Starlinks. And so what they did is Starlink started implementing some technology to decrease the luminosity of the satellites, so you will see them less when watching the sky. And also they had some thrusters, which basically allowed them to be deorbited, so crash into the oceans when they are dismissed.
But it's insane. Like, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's mind-blowing, because I don't know enough about it to say it's bad. It's mind-blowing that you have so many satellites around Earth that you can't see the moon.
I mean, it's mind-blowing that basically...
And then it's bad, and then it's super bad that there's no, again, for me, that humanity, us the people, don't get to decide how a common good like space is administered.
No, I fully agree. And also, it's very sad to basically that one country exactly like, can enable a private company to cover the inner space of satellites, and no one has a say about it.
Like it's unfair for every other country, but also for every citizen. Like, so I remember writing and playing this game of like a dystopian future. So if you had to imagine like a dystopian future, a really bad one, what would you think, right? And obviously it's like inequalities keep rising, climate change is impacting us, but like go a bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I always had this image of basically Bezos and Musk flying into their penis-shaped rockets to Mars and building like super high-end real estate that and owning like every single surface of Mars and the moon, and it being, you know, like all of those horrible movies where you have a few really rich people while the rest of us die of heat on Earth. Like, and because they have decided that they own other planets.
But I think it's not, as of now, we're taking that trajectory. I mean, as of now, if you're very wealthy or have access to possibilities, you definitely can see your future in space, for example, while if you're not, it's just a dream. So clearly we're going to, is an hyper-capitalistic dystopian future in a way. I see another comment from Barnabas. So
do you want to read it a lot?
Yeah, I think that this will only change if there are many strong countries in space, so they all have to reach a compromise. Otherwise, our only chance is some sort of international governance treaty. I fully agree with you, and actually I have other two examples. They're interesting in the sense. One is a failed attempt to do better, and the other one is the current best system that we are creating, that is the Artemis program. So in 1979,
so we're starting the failed attempt.
The failed attempt. In 1979, the UN passed a moon treaty. That is something that Colombia would definitely love.
I've been wanting to. So we're launching consultations in January to crowdsource democratic global governance. I've been wanting to do this for space regulation for like 5 years.
Yeah, and basically the idea of this treaty was the one of making sure that it's called the Moon Treaty, but it applies also to other celestial bodies. The idea that if all countries were to come together in this treaty, international law would apply to celestial body, their orbits, and so on and so forth. So basically that there would be shared management of resources, shared measurement of shared exploitation of resources, shared research facilities. For example, there was a provision that even if you had a manned station on a planet,
Human.
A human, I don't know if you say human, a space station with like people inside, and on a planet, you could not claim possession or any particular claim. So it's really an idea of saying, okay, we explore together, we create settlement together, we build something that is for humankind. But sadly enough, only 19 countries sign up to it.
Seriously?
18, actually.
Do you know which ones are the countries?
Yeah, you can find it easily. France is the only like Western country, I think, in it.
Really?
Which is very interesting. The Moon Treaty. But all the big countries that they basically have space operations did not participate. So neither the US, nor China, nor Russia. So the countries participating are Armenia, Australia, Austria, Belgium, Chile, Kazakhstan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Mexico, Morocco, Netherlands, Pakistan, Peru, Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Uruguay, Venezuela. And these are the full parties. And signatories are France, Guatemala, India, and Romania. So India and France actually joined as well.
When was that?
1980, 1979. And there are some countries that are still like, accessing the treaty now, like Turkey, Armenia, quite recently. It's just that without the big people in the treaty, it has very little relevance.
But it's still pretty cool.
It's really cool because there is an attempt to say, basically, let's do it together. Obviously, it's more convenient for those that don't have the capabilities to get there, but it's also the spirit of solidarity, right?
Yeah, my only problem is it kind of comes like, so it's the same way. Last week we talked a lot about supranational organizations and their failures when it comes to including the voices of citizens and so on. And right now in those things, you have like Venezuela, that is a full-on dictatorship, right? Or Saudi Arabia, that is like not great on human rights and so on. So like, yes, it's better than nothing, but I would love to have actually a citizens assembly or convention or whatever to discuss how space is administered.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is what we advocate for, basically. And now going to the current best attempt that we have at cooperation. Basically, it was announced, I mean, it's been announced for many years, but the Artemis program is now into effect. It's a collaboration of government space agencies and private spaceflight companies bound together by the Artemis Accords. And basically, the idea is that 21 countries came together, mostly US, it's the Western allies, plus a few emerging power like Brazil, South Korea, and the UAE. And the idea is they want to creating a permanent base camp on the moon, and also facilitate human mission to Mars.
Isn't it to check if they can find water on the moon in order to be able to facilitate?
I'm sure that there is also that. Yeah, there are a lot
because they launched the thing this weekend, right?
Yeah, that was one of the parts. Yeah,
that was so cool. So I was reading about it, and I was like, they wanted to check. I think it was the part of the moon that hasn't really been explored yet, to see if they could find some stuff to facilitate human missions to Mars after.
Yeah, big problem though. There are two big problems here. One, it's really prone to commercial interest, they say. So because of the fact that spaceflight companies were part of the agreement and worked on it, it's really commercial in a way. It's about exploitation of resources. Which
how so? Like what?
I didn't look at the details, but basically there are a lot of criticism online of that. And if you want, we can do an analysis now more in depth. But it's basically it kind of like put together the norms and the regulation to exploit the moon from a commercial standpoint. But again, it's not been agreed by everyone. It's only agreed by 20 countries as of now. And
what are the countries?
The countries are basically the US, European countries, Canada, Japan, United Kingdom, Brazil, South Korea, and UAE. So basically, it's a lot of Western countries or Western aligned countries. And that's the second criticism that came from Russia and China, is that basically this is clearly done by the US for the US. And it doesn't really work for anyone else. And so China and Russia are trying a new concept, the International Lunar Research Station. So basically, they are setting up a competing base on the moon. So we are really going to the worst kind of scenarios we could expect, with like competing nations on the moon, probably militarized zones, and so on. So we are replicating exactly the same problem that we have on this planet on another body. And I think it is a big mistake of humankind. I really hope it's not going to become concrete. I hope that more people will join either the Artemis Accord or an amended agreement. But so far, it really doesn't look good. And it reminds me,
because basically they might be mining the moon.
Yeah.
And claiming some of its resources.
Exactly. Which is completely wrong. Even if you think that like commercializing the moon is good because then more people have access to it, which is obviously a good point. The fact that only a handful of countries can do that, and then you're gonna have another handful of countries doing the same on the other side of the moon.
What if we had a space agency that was elected by the people and accountable to the people, and not to the US or China?
That is exactly what we need. We need to democratize all of this, because right now it's completely in the hand of national interest.
Yeah.
So to recap, and this is the good news, because at least something is happening.
That's the good news.
That's the good news. So to recap, we know that the current global order is failing. We discussed it last week, and everyone knows about the failures in climate change, in the fight against climate change, the failures to stop wars, the failure to distribute COVID vaccine. But for this week, we actually came to explore topics that are less known, they are less famous, and where actually the lack of global cooperation are impacting massively the future of humankind. And today we chose a space because, first of all, it's a very interesting topic, and second, is something that we see like with interest. It's wonderful to see rockets departing the planet, but we're really running into a very bad place, and there is not much going on to stop this. And so we went through how the International Space Station is going to soon be dismantled, and there is no plan to create a new one, done with like countries from different kind of geopolitical parts of the spectrum. We discussed about the Outer Space Treaty, which is the backbone of a space law, but is really outdated, and that's why it's giving away to many private companies and countries to exploit national resources, because there is not a treaty that protects from the moon and similar bodies from exploitation. We discussed about the Moon Treaty. There was a wonderful idea to do so, but it didn't work. And only 19 countries participated, or 20 countries participated. We spoke about Starlink, so an example of a commercial company that actually is doing exactly what we are worried of, despite the fact that it's doing also good stuff. And we love the fact that it's going to be better internet connection in rural communities and so on. But the fact is basically imposing its business model, polluting space without the consent of, I don't know how many Americans are like around 300 million. So probably 95% of the population is not, or 96% of the population is not consultant on Elon Musk choices, but still they have to, Elon Musk can go ahead and do it. And last but not least, we discussed about the Artemis program. So a new program that has been done to send humans to the moon, and then from there flight rockets to Mars, which is very exciting, but it fully represents the problems that we have today in global corporations. And I'm talking about global corporations, so not like along democratic values or so on, but the idea of we need to work together to stop climate change and explore space. And today, the big attempt that is going on is completely Western, and is completely refused by China and Russia. They are superpowers on the other side. And that is very scary, because it means that the same dynamics that are crippling our planet today might soon be cripple the moon as well.
So after doing all of this research, well, thanks for doing it. And what do you think is the solution?
So I think that there are two solutions here. First of all, we need to, and this regardless of how we do that, a new treaty to regulate private exploitation of celestial bodies must be done.
But also national, no? Like, isn't it weird that a few countries who get there first because they have the capacity? It's not only about Musk and Bezos that it pisses me off that they get to go there before the whole of humanity, but like that the US versus any other country gets to go there first and establish a presence and put the little flag and all of this. It's weird. Like,
I fully agree. So let me take a step back. I think that private companies should definitely be regulated, as well as the dealing of nation states on celestial body. Both things are incredibly important. And right now, there is no system to regulate that, which means that as soon as a country or a nation or a coalition of countries with the power to put 100 people on the moon, they will claim territory. It's very likely they will claim territory. It's very likely they will at least say this portion of the moon is our protectorate, is where we do research, right? So they will effectively shut other countries out, other parts of humankind out, which I think is very scary, because it's exactly what you see in sci-fi movies when things go very wrong.
I was going to say, I'm going to watch Star Wars after this.
Exactly. And then the second thing that must be done, and this is obviously a solution to many other problems, is that we need to make sure that humankind as a whole can express itself democratically on these topics. Because the truth is that I'm sure that if you ask an Indian citizen, a Canadian citizen, a South African citizen, how do they think that the moon should be handled, or how do we think that as humanity we should manage the moon, no one would say it should be India's priority or South Africa priority. Yeah, maybe someone would say it, but most people would agree that it should be a humanity endeavor to explore space, to get resources together, to expand knowledge. And I think these are more long-term solutions, what we're advocating for. But I think it's fundamental. And if we don't do so, it's going to be a very, very bad situation.
And I think there's something else to remember is space exploration is super cool, because it's literally dreaming beyond the stars. It's incredible. But there's also the fact that through space exploration, a lot of technologies were invented that we use today in medicine, in communication, and so on. And it was due to the fact that we needed new tech for space exploration that we developed all of this. So for our own capacities on Earth, for our own health, for our own everything, it's extremely interesting to be able to have humanity collaborate, share knowledge, share resources, and share results on such key topics. It's really cool.
I fully agree. So I really hope to witness this in my lifetime, and not to witness what's going on right now. And again, I think you said it right. Like 50 years ago, if you were told people like, how do you expect this to go? This would be the negative scenario, where basically companies start polluting space and countries planting flag on the moon. But now we're living through it, so we must do something. We cannot like stay aside and be bystander, where negative scenarios after negative scenarios get created. And again, it's in our power. I mean, these countries answer to us, to the people, so far. So even if we need to build something better, in the meantime, we need to protect what we have.
I think we can end it on this. So to recap, we talked about space to show what the global order is not getting right. Tomorrow, we'll talk about fiscal justice or injustice, so the economy. And Wednesday, we'll talk about tech regulation. So join us for all of those lives. Send us your ideas, send us your comments, send us your feedback. Subscribe to this channel, share it, like it, comment. Am I forgetting anything?
Do everything you can.
Exactly. And have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Oh, we died.